stimulus actions so far, they've been mostly cyclical. Right now, we're looking at a plan that is aiming at the structural side of the U.S. economy, so really lifting long-term growth and the economy's long-term potential. We don't think it's necessarily going to create the most jobs ever since World War II, but we think there could be a potential 1 million jobs over the next year and a half that's created by this plan, and maybe 2 million jobs over the next 3 years. So a net benefit, but also, and perhaps more importantly, a boost to the economy's potential. And that's really what we're looking for at this stage of the recovery.
Right. And boosting the economy's potential, Doug, is more than just boosting GDP. It means we can do more GDP on top of more GDP in the future. You know, it sort of multiplies. But you're much more skeptical on what the jobs plan would do. Why? And what do you think would happen instead?
Well, I agree with Greg that you really do want to look at the long-run potential, and this is not about the cyclical recovery. And we simply took candidate Biden at his word and raised $3.3 trillion in taxes, and we all agree that's bad news for the economy. But we then plowed that $3.3 trillion exclusively into productive infrastructure and R&D, thereby stacking the deck as much as possible. We put it into a formal model, much like the Joint Committee on Taxation would use, and the answer that comes out is that over the next 10 years, the economy shrinks slightly as a result. So the bad news from the taxes is not outweighed by the productivity of a much bigger infrastructure stock. It goes up by 16%. And on net, that gives you less productivity, less growth in real wages, and that's bad news for the American worker.
Doug and Greg, I'm happy to know both of you guys to be able to rely upon you, and I need to have some kind of closure on this debate here. We can't leave here with this kind of thing. And we do not, I tell you, we do not want to have a deep debate about the differences in economic models, because people would turn it off and they'd go right to sleep. But let me just start with one place I think where the big differences are. Greg, give you the first shot at this. Greg, the impact of raising corporate taxes. I think Doug's model takes that as very, very negative. You think it doesn't have that big an effect. Make your case on that.
Yeah, I think we're both in agreement that increased investment in the long term is good. And there is about over $2 trillion of additional investment over the next 8 years. So that has a fairly strong net positive effect in terms of economic activity, in terms of jobs. The key question is how negative the increase in revenues becomes for the economy. And when we look at it from a slightly different angle. When we look at the increase in the statutory corporate tax rate, at the increase in the global minimum tax, at the limitations on inversions, we think that it will have a negative effect on economic activity, but that it will be manageable. Just to give you some numbers, we think that on net, the plan would add to growth in 2022 of about 0.8 percentage points, and within that, a drag of about a tenth or two from the increase in corporate taxation. So if we look back at the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and that effect, we think that that had a fairly positive effect on business investment, but not as much as people were saying. We did not see as much of an increase in economic activity as was said at the time. So reversing part of that won't have as negative of an effect as others may be saying.
And so Doug, Steve, you think CEOs pick up their toys and go home, right? That's what happens when you raise the corporate tax?
I think the corporate tax has a strong negative impact, no question. But I think there are really two very important points to make. Number one is how you think about the baseline. In our work, the American Rescue Plan does its job. We're back to full employment, and we credit no cyclical improvement in employment to the American Jobs Plan. So that's a big difference, I think, in some of the results. The second thing that's really important here is that, with the announcement for today, for example, of the higher capital gains tax rate, the fact that we're going to have an American Family Plan, which has a bunch of genuine non-infrastructure spending, more tax credits, paid family leave, things like that, we are migrating toward what we actually priced, which was a candidate Biden's plan with a lot of tax increases, including top rates going up, capital gains rates going up, and a lot of spending that has no productivity impacts.
Doug,
so we're migrating toward our result.
Doug, let me ask you, as we move forward with this, given the counterproposal today that would be under $600 billion in size, what is the number where you think this could help the economy more than it hurts the economy?
So it's not a number, and I think that's a mistake that's been made. It was made for 4 years in the Trump administration, saying we need $1 trillion infrastructure plan. You need to decide what you're trying to accomplish. I think we should close the digital divide, do the broadband work necessary to get that done, fix roads and bridges, and then figure out what that costs. Finance as much of it as you can with user fees, the traditional way to finance infrastructure in the United States, far more efficient, and as a backstop, go to general revenue. That's the right way to go at this, but that's not the plan at the moment.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.